His wife warned him against leaving their son on the lawn alone. "You never know what kind of people are lurking out there," she said. But he didn't heed her advice. From his bedroom window, he watched as the sanitation worker pressed the yellow brick into his son's pocket. The man scooped the boy up, grinning, before they disappeared behind the fence. He raced through the lawn, hoping he wasn't too late. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Dave Palmer was 32 when he and his wife, Malaya, had their firstborn kid. Life was supposed to get better now. They both had great jobs and had just moved into their dream house. But their love life seemed to be deteriorating by the year. And even having a baby didn't seem to fix it. The Kansas City locals had just moved into Brookside Park, where the incident occurred. Dave worked as a software developer for a local tech company. Newly elected the head of technology, he mostly worked from home, unlike Malaya, a paralegal who had to commute daily to town. Dave and Malaya had always talked about having a big family. They grew up as the only children in their respective families and understood the loneliness of having no siblings. They didn't want that for their baby, and thus vowed to have as many kids as possible. The encounter with the sanitation worker would show them the world's true nature. Dave, who worked from home, would spend his days with his wife and kid, enjoying the blessing on his hands. But soon, a dark cloud would cast over this happy family. Trouble came knocking as soon as Malaya's maternity leave came to a close. Although she went back to work, she loathed leaving the house. This bitterness would be the start of their problems. Dave and Malaya started quarreling every night over their careers. The weeks turned into months, and Carrie turned too. The relationship between his parents had deteriorated much, with the little boy being the reason the two were still together. Typically, the cleaners would finish their job and take the trash bags to the front lawn. From there, Dave would take it down the driveway when he came in the afternoon. That way, it could be collected by the garbage truck. But that month, there was no garbage for him to pick up in the evening, despite the cleaners leaving it out at noon. Dave couldn't help but wonder what was happening, if he only knew what was going on behind his back. Speaking to one of his neighbors, Dave learned that a new garbage truck usually passed by every afternoon, collecting trash bags all over the neighborhood. The dad was happy to hear this. He even learned the sanitation worker's name and was looking forward to meeting him. He had no clue what he was stepping into. On the streets of their neighborhood, something else was happening that they weren't aware of. The new garbage man, Tucker, was already making his rounds. Every afternoon, he'd appear, collect the filled trash bags on Dave's doorstep and leave. But Dave wasn't the only person taking notice of the sanitation worker. His son, the 2-year-old Carrie, loved the sound of the garbage truck and would race to the window. He would jump and wave, scream, "Truck!" at the top of his voice. Even though the truck fascinated the little boy, it was the new garbage man that truly had his focus. The boy admired him even more than the truck. Carrie eventually started waving at Tucker, the sanitation worker, who would always grin and wave back. Dave thought this was a wholesome interaction, unaware of the sanitation worker's intentions. Dave was still trying to work on his relationship with Malaya. Dave shared what Carrie had been doing lately, thinking Malaya would be as impressed as she usually was whenever Carrie learned a new skill or formed a new interest. But he was incredibly wrong. Instead of supporting their son's newfound interest, Malaya had a word of warning for her husband. Was she right about what she said? This time, the mom was apprehensive. She warned Dave not to let the boy out of his sight, no matter the reason. "You never know what kind of people are lurking out there," she said. But Dave wouldn't heed her warning. He was sure everything would be fine. There had been reports of abductions nationwide, and Malaya was only looking out for their son. But Dave saw it as her overreacting. Carrie usually went outside to run around the lawn and pick up bugs. His mornings were solely dedicated to that activity. Dave saw no reason to interfere, let alone change such an integral part of their son's growth. Usually, Dave would watch from his home office next to the living room as Carrie ran around the front lawn. The front doors were generally wide open, so he'd race back inside if anything went wrong. On that fateful day, Dave had only headed upstairs for a mere second. He needed a few documents for one of his clients and had run to fetch them. Carrie was playing outside, but Dave wasn't concerned. He was busy inside his file cabinet when the roar of the garbage truck rang outside. At first, he thought it was one of his neighbors who drove a supercharged sports car. But this sound was more distinct and guttural. It was the sound a massive object with a huge motor would make. At the back of his mind, Dave knew it was the garbage truck. The truck's visits were on Tuesdays. Today was Thursday, which Dave would have known if he had checked the date. But he was so engrossed in finding his files that he didn't stop to think that something might be wrong. It was only when his son stopped making noise that he realized he had made a mistake. Carrie laughed outside for a few seconds, and Dave knew it was because he was excited about seeing his favorite garbage man. Or at least that's what he thought it was. But suddenly, there was nothing but utter silence. Dave froze for a moment before sprinting to his bedroom window. What on earth was going on down there? Dave's sight landed on the man that had gotten out of the truck. He was dressed in the usual garbage man clothes, but something seemed to be out of place. The man was wiggling a yellow Lego brick before Carrie's eyes. And it wasn't Tucker, the man who usually picked up Dave's trash bags. This was someone he had never seen before. The bright toy enthralled the little boy, who was fascinated with those kinds of things. He reached for it, and the man quickly scooped him into his arms. Dave couldn't believe what he saw. In that instant, he forgot about everything. His client, the paperwork, his struggles with his wife, they were all gone. All he could think about was getting to his son. But he was also Dave's world. The little boy was the only happiness the miserable father had left. The dad sped out of the house, running faster than his feet could carry him, and within a matter of seconds, he was on the lawn. The garbage truck's distinct growl was pretty close. If he hurried up, he could get to it before it disappeared. Just outside of his property, there were a couple of sanitation workers. One of them had Carrie in his arms, but he still helped the man push a massive garbage bin toward the truck. The man was explaining things to Carrie, who was laughing hysterically. Dave paused, taking in this one-in-a-million interaction. From the corner of his eyes, Tucker approached with another garbage bin. The frantic father let out a sigh of relief. He was still confused about the whole situation, but once he saw Tucker, he knew his son was safe. Even though he didn't know the man, he could see that he would never harm a child. Tucker high-fived Carrie, who fought the other man's hold to go to him. They talked for a minute, with Carrie's words bordering on gibberish instead of actual sense. The little boy's enthusiasm was apparent, and at that moment his father couldn't have been happier. His son finally got to spend time with his hero, and he was clearly enjoying it. The other garbage collector introduced himself as Elvis. He was Tucker's right-hand man. Every garbage truck needed 2 workers, and he was the second. He knew Carrie as well as Tucker did, and the two of them wanted to surprise their favorite toddler. Dave, who was still astonished by the encounter, spent some time getting to know him and Tucker. Dave couldn't stop thanking the men for their kindness. He was still looking for a moment to introduce Carrie to his favorite new friend. But the 2 garbage men had taken things to the next level. They had even gone as far as to let him help. And they had shown the little boy the love he had been missing out on lately. Even though Dave wanted to do the same, he couldn't because of work. But the 2 men weren't done just yet. That yellow Lego was only one piece of the set they had bought him to show him how much they appreciated his friendship. And the Legos were a representation of something much bigger. Elvis and Tucker had asked their boss if they could take Carrie and his father on a ride along so the little boy could have the full experience.